Geeks and geekettes. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, gats and gittens, welcome back to Ask Chuck Dixon, where you get to ask me, a world-famous, world-renowned, world-celebrated comic book writer, about what I do for a living. And what I do for a living is I write comic books. Now, if I could talk to you about something else, I'd probably have a lot more followers. Hell, if I did a weekly hour-long video going to Home Depot looking at router bits, I could probably have 500,000 followers now. But I choose to talk to you about the only thing I know about, and that's comic books. So let's go, fire away, and don't fall back. Ace Mowick. Which of the annoying sidekick characters do you find the most grating from the various mediums? If you can't narrow it down to one, feel free to rank them and elaborate. Also, how would you fix them without killing or removing them entirely? It's a tall order. It also assumes there's a lot of sidekicks I don't like. I'm not going to name the usuals that everybody can't stand. But the only one that comes to mind is the most useless, the most pointless of all of the sidekicks in any medium, and that's Aqualad. And largely because Aquaman's so pointless, why would you give him a kid sidekick? Now, I know a whole bunch of you just started writing comments or turned me off. But I'm not an Aquaman fan. I've never made a secret of that. And can you imagine being assigned to write Aqualad? You know, if I were assigned Aqualad, I would just go, well, why don't you just kick me in the balls and throw me down the stairs? I mean, if you don't want me to write for you, just say so, but don't assign me Aqualad. What would you do? I mean, I assume I guess if I was assigned Aqualad, back in the day when I desperately wanted to get into comics, I would have taken it. I might even have done something cool with it, although I cannot for the life of me imagine what that would have been. Completely pointless character. Now the comments are going to come about how fabulous he is and how he's essential to the core of DC Comic Universe, but I ain't buying it. Now, when I was a kid and Captain America came back, I remember that. I remember buying that issue of the Avengers. Very excited. I don't know. I'm not quite sure how I knew who Captain America was, but I knew he was really cool. And Captain America comes back, and he's without Bucky. And when I was a kid, I found Bucky very annoying, even though Bucky was dead. Because Cap just kept moping around about Bucky. And I just wanted Cap to be awesome. I'm a kid. I mean, I don't understand grief. I don't care about grief. I mean, so Cap's is always, the action is always interrupted by Cap just sort of, thinking sad thoughts about Bucky's death and was he responsible and what if Bucky was here? And I sure miss Bucky. So, I kind of didn't like Bucky posthumously, if that makes any sense. Now, there are sidekicks I think are terrific. I love a great sidekick. Not this one. One of my favorites is, and I couldn't find a decent illustration of him, is Nkema. It was Tarzan's monkey sidekick. If you've never read the Tarzan novels, you probably don't know that Cheetah was not in the Tarzan novels. There was no chimpanzee hanging around with Tarzan. And why would he? They're vicious, nasty creatures. But he hung around with this macaque or monkey named Nkema. Nkema was probably the size of a house cat, which is what made the relationship so cool. Nkema would spy for Tarzan or do various things, but obviously Nkema could not go side by side with Tarzan in a fight. He was a tiny little critter. But what was cool about it, I think what I responded to when I read the novels, was that Tarzan treated Nkema like a total equal. Nkema was a little bit of a coward, and Tarzan, okay, I understand. You're a little monkey. Of course you're going to be afraid. And I saw such a cool relationship. And I've always looked forward to an appearance by Nkema. I think he appears in like the 12th Tarzan novel. He's not in the novels from the beginning. And every once in a while he'll show up, particularly in the Dell comics, when it's not Cheetah. Another terrific sidekick, Willie Garvin, sidekick to Modesty Blaze. The comic strips are great, but if you've never read the novels are just exceptional thrillers. I put them right up there with Ian Fleming. and other great thriller writers. You know, international spy and crime stuff. And Modesty Blaise is like the ultimate femme fatale. And Willie Garvin is her, you know, practically lifelong partner in all of this. And their relationship, it's not a romantic relationship. It's a relationship of friends, of equals again, which is the best sidekicks are equals, like Tonto and the Lone Ranger. And it's just really, it's hard to describe it. It's really special. It's like Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson special. And if you've never read the novels, I suggest you hunt them up. And another one, it's a bit obscure. Tim Holt, Western cowboy star. You may know him from The Treasure Sierra Madre, where he was Humphrey Bogart's gold hunting partner. Tim Holt made a long series of Saturday matinee B westerns. And in a lot of them, his sidekick was played by Richard Martin, playing a character named Cheeto Rafferty. And Cheeto Rafferty was half Mexican and half Irish. And as Cheeto describes it, I am Mexican to win the woman, I am Irish to win the fight. And he was a great comic relief character in that he wasn't a complete moron. He was just a ladies' man. He's even, as you can see here, a little taller than Holt. And he was good with a gun, good on a horse, and, you know, good-looking guy. And he had a great comedic timing, and I really enjoy these Tim Holt Western, you know, short features, and Richard Martin makes them all the more enjoyable. So another great, if obscure, sidekick. Ian Potash. I read an interview where Stan Lee was asked about why a large number of the characters would have unconventional family units, i.e. Peter Parker only having an aunt and an uncle. His reply was simply that it's harder to keep track of and write for a large family of recurring characters, a problem that doesn't exist when the character is only a small family. Do you relate to this strategy at all? Has this ever been a conscious decision for you? Yeah, I mean, you know, it goes back a long way that, you know, if you have a story and your guy's a family man or a family woman or whatever, you kind of shrink the family down, because you don't want, you know, necessarily the story to be an ensemble cast thing, unless that's the point of it. You want to concentrate on your leads, and maybe for whatever reason you want to have your character have a child but be available for romantic entanglements or what have you. And it's just a way of paring the story down to the main characters, because, you know, you've only got so much real estate in a television series or a comic book in which to tell a story. And generally, your characters like this are orphans. You got a lot of orphans out there in fiction. This goes all the way back. You know, Oliver Twist, Little Orphan Annie, whatever. And this immediately makes the character an underdog and sympathetic. And you sort of shrunk everything down. You know, Superman, Batman, all the rest. Why am I jumping backwards? Peter Parker, Ditko primarily wanted to make the story about Peter Parker and to make him sympathetic and alone in the world, except for his Aunt May. Obviously, Uncle Ben isn't around following the origin. And because, you know, unless you're writing something like a comic strip like Gasoline Alley, where it's this saga, it's this epic, and you've got this whole world and to explore and all the time in the world to explore it, you know, you can do that, but not in a comic book, generally. You don't have that kind of room. I remember my kids were going to a private school, and I found out one day when I went to pick them up that Harry Potter had been banned at the school. And I went in and asked the principal. I was always going in and ask the principal questions about because I mean, it's a private school. I'm paying for this. I want to know, why are you teaching my kids this, not teaching my kids that, you know, whatever. Yeah, a little more say than you do at a public school. So I went in and I said, what's the deal with Harry Potter? And she said, well, we don't like the Harry Potter books because he's an orphan, because his parents died at the beginning of the story. And I said, that's going to eliminate a lot of great fiction. And I list, you know, Superman, Batman, Tarzan. all these characters. I said, that's just a common fictional trope, the orphan who doesn't realize the significance of their life or who they are until later on. I says, why would you do that? And I think they later removed the ban. I think I reasoned them out of it. I mean, I was no big advocate for Harry Potter. I really didn't give a damn one way or the other, but I knew Harry Potter wasn't going to, warp kids' minds. And I was surprised because their objection wasn't that it had witchcraft in it or anything like that. It was the orphan bit. So I found kind of odd. But yeah, it's a common trope. Now, when I started doing My Sister Suprema, I wanted to include her whole family. I mean, it was the point. It's her and her little brother. The relationship is key, and I wanted to keep both parents around, because I could get all this story grist out of their reactions and their characters. The dad's kind of a typical dad. He's there. He goes to work. He doesn't want any trouble. He just wants to watch TV at night and be left alone. And the mom is the one driving things. What are the kids doing? Why are they doing it? And if anybody's going to find out Suprema's secret of being a superhero, it's going to be mom, because she's watching the kids like a hawk. And so it creates tension. This is one of the reasons that I wanted to keep Jack Drake around, Tim Drake's dad, the third Robin. They kept wanting to kill Jack Drake. Let's kill Jack Drake. He's causing problems in the story and everything else. And I'm like, but the problems that Jack Drake causes in the story is the story. And I really want to keep him around. And I saw, of course, as soon as I left the book, they killed him. I mean, I don't know what it was at DC. They just wanted that character dead. And, so anyway, long story short, you jettison characters that are no good to you, like Chuck Cunningham on Happy Days, as I referenced in an earlier episode. We don't need Chuck Cunningham around. There's no story for him. So get rid of him. Send him off to college and never give him the plane fare back. Joshua Ignatowski, which Rifleman episodes would you recommend as being the best episodes to introduce someone to the series with? If the answer is all of them, then which ones are your favorites? I would start, obviously, with the first few episodes that were written and directed by Sam Peckinpah, because they really lay out the character and his relationship, and what's going on in the town. He's a small-time rancher with a young son to raise. He's a widower, once again, no wife around, unusual family unit. And the first two episodes really set up who Lucas McCain is. And who Lucas McCain is a guy who doesn't take shit from anybody, which, is important to know in the episodes coming up. And, we get to meet Sheriff Micah, and there are very few recurring characters on this show. And just basic, get the basics of what's going on here. They're living on a relatively isolated ranch. We assume half a day's ride out of North Fork, the town. And, whatever. That's the basis of the show, very simple basis of the show, but introduced evocatively and everything else, so the rest of the episodes make sense. Now, moving on to favorite episodes, hands down, it's a two-parter called Waste, and it was written by Robert Koepp. The actor Robert Koepp wrote this episode, and in it, Lucas and Sheriff Micah and the son, Mark, they travel for whatever reason to this ghost town. And the ghost town is currently occupied by a band of Mexicans, and Mexican bandits to be precise, and not nice guys as you might expect. And they put Lucas and Mark and Sheriff Micah through some pretty bad stuff. In this episode, the suspense level is high, and it's a mean story. I mean, we're used to Lucas McCain getting a little ticked off and pumping lead into every bad guy he sees. I mean, that's the premise of the show. That's why you watch the show, to see, how's Lucas going to handle this one. But this one, this is a trial for him, And like I said, it's tough. It's mean. It doesn't look away from the violence. And it's probably Connor's most effective, most, I don't know, driven performance in it. Because boy, does he get angry and scared because his son's there. And these guys are going to kill them. Not subscribe, but kill them. And it's a great two-parter. I mean, it's not quite a feature film, as it's only in total 45 minutes long. So it's an hour episode of a show. But boy, there's a lot packed into it. A lot of emotion and terrifically shot as well. I can't remember who directed it, but that's the one I would suggest along with the opening episode. Now, if you subscribe, thank you. If you subscribe, check and make sure you're still subscribed. If you haven't subscribed, hit the button. Whatever. I don't monetize this channel anymore, so if I'm only talking to 5 of you, it's really immaterial. But it'd be nice to grow the channel and provide some security, keep it around for a while, make it worth doing, and bring in some more questions. Although you people are great with the questions, including Jason Shepard. What breaks your suspension of disbelief? For those not in the know, suspension of disbelief is when you interact with a piece of media and you accept the media's premise. Superheroes, vampires, a duck and a rabbi walking into a bar. The notion that a multimillionaire singer works as a truck driver and so on. You know this isn't real, but for the sake of the story, you agree to play along. You can lose your suspension of disbelief when something happens to break the spell. It can be poor acting or bad special effects in a TV show or movie, or out of character moments or just illogical plot twists. Well, all of the above will take you out of a movie. I watched a movie just the other night called The Land of Bad, and I really liked it. I really, really liked it. But there were moments that took me out of the movie. Now, it's funny because I heard indirectly from a former Green Beret, and he didn't like their weapons discipline. He had some problem with dust covers on their rifles and things I didn't notice because I'm not a special forces guy. I know guns, but I don't know guns in combat. I don't know the discipline, protocols. What threw me out of the movie, the very beginning of the movie, is they do a halo jump, which is a high altitude, low opening parachute jump. And these are generally done from 35, 40,000 feet. Basically you're jumping out of a belly of a B-2 bomber or something like that. And you have to wear oxygen because you're up there so high, and just, freezing temperatures. You're at the edge of space and you're going to parachute out. But in this movie, they do a halo jump from a Black Hawk helicopter. First of all, a Black Hawk helicopter can't get to the altitudes necessary for a halo jump, and it doesn't have a pressurized cabin. It can't fly into that thin, rarefied air up in the ionosphere or stratosphere. So that threw me off. The other thing that threw me off was Russell Crowe was supposed to play a Air Force captain, and he runs the drones. That's the gimmick of the movie. There's a mission in the Philippines, hunter-killer mission in the Philippines, and they're being covered by drones operated from Nellis Air Force Base just outside of Las Vegas. I mean, it's a cool idea and a realistic idea. Obviously, these things happen. But Russell Crowe is way too old to be an Air Force captain, way too old to still be in the Air Force, and way too fat. I'm nothing against fat people, but Russell Crowe has become dangerously obese. And it was just weird. And every time, and as much as I like Russell Crowe and he gave a terrific performance, when you just saw him, it was just took you right out of the movie. You're like, wow, this guy's got to cut down. There needs to be an intervention here. But as I said before, you can, whatever your area of expertise is, when it's presented in a film, if a mistake is made, it can throw you off. I mean, if you're a baker and you're like, oh, I wouldn't put that much yeast into donut dough, nobody else is going to notice that. Or, if you're a car mechanic, well, I wouldn't use that wrench. Okay. Again, no one would notice that but you. With me, it's guns. And if I see a gun in period properly being used, everything else, I'm like, ooh, cool gun. If it's not, if it's out of period, if they're using lever action Winchesters in a Civil War movie, I'm like, oh, takes me right out. I can't really believe the movie. I can't trust the movie at that point, especially if you're doing like a realistic kind of Western. And here, Kurt Russell as Wyatt Earp is packing a buntline special, his signature weapon, and nickel plated, and everything is cool and doesn't take me out of the moment. I'm just going, hey, there's that buntline special that Wyatt Earp used to pack. Now, if you're not doing what's supposed to be a realistic Western, I don't care. If you've presented early on that your Western isn't meant to represent an authentic version of the American frontier, then anything goes. I don't care. You can pull out a Thompson submachine gun as long as the pacing is brisk enough and there's enough action and shooting and fighting. I'm not really that bothered by it. And that goes for anything. I mean, you're watching some gonzo action flick, as opposed to historical drama or realistic crime drama. You're a lot more forgiving, when a guy gets hit by a semi truck and gets right back up again, because you've already bought in. If you're watching like Fast and the Furious or something like that, you've already bought in that this is wacko. I'm not going to see anything realistic here. This is not a Martin Scorsese movie I'm watching. I'm watching the popcorn entertainment. But even then, you can't get too goofy. There's a Steven Seagal movie, Out for Justice, and it is I saw it with an audience of drunks on a Saturday night. It was a gas. I mean, screaming and yelling and hooping and hollering and jumping up and down and throwing stuff. I mean, they just dug the hell out of this movie, and it was a great audience experience. And it's just straight up Steven Seagal punching, shooting, and killing movie, and everything's cool until Steven Seagal has this emotional moment in which he talks about his father used to push a cart through the neighborhood, and it's like, oh, okay, well he's supposed to be Italian, and his Italian father was of humble roots. We're learning this is a man of the street. His character is a person who understands what life is like on the hard edge, and he goes on to talk about his dad's pushcart business was selling disposable scissors. And you got to think, disposable scissors? When would he have been selling these? He would have been selling these like in the 1930s and 40s. People didn't have disposable anything back then. No, dumbass. He was sharpening scissors. Merchants had pushcart businesses going through neighborhoods offering to sharpen your kitchen knives, your scissors, whatever. They would go around with a grindstone and sharpen. It's like either the writer of the movie was too dumb, or Steven Seagal was ad-libbing this and didn't know what the hell he was talking about, and how no one on set went, disposable scissors. And boy, does that take you right out of the story, because you're thinking about disposable scissors, not whether or not William Forsythe's going to kill him. The other thing that'll take me right out is bad dialogue. As soon as somebody says I'm too old for this shit, I'm like, oh man, or the many other banal cliches that are in almost every movie. Let's get out of here, which is the most often repeated line in movies. All that kind of stuff. We've got company. We've got company. When somebody says we've got company, unless the doorbell is just wrong, who says that in real life? We've got company. It just takes me right out of the movie. It makes me think, these people did not ask themselves the question that every writer asks themselves every day 100 times: is there a better way to say this? They didn't even bother with that. Either that, or they were in the ADR room in editing, putting in new sound effects and voices, and there was no writer around, so they just came up with cliches. Or, most likely of all, the moron producing the movies, like, ooh, have him say this, because I heard it 1,000 times in a movie, and that's what you say in a movie at this point. So but that will take me right out. Now my wife's bugaboo is accents. A bad accent will take her out of a movie, particularly if it's a Southern accent, because somehow, I don't know how, I haven't spent enough time in the South, but she can tell you if it's an East Kentucky accent, a West Kentucky accent, if it's a Southern Louisiana or Northern Louisiana accent. She can hear it, and she can tell you what it is and discern the differences. And that can, and her big thing is when they switch from one accent to, well, now they sound like they're from Florida. Well, now they sound like they're from Arkansas. Now they sound like they're from Mississippi. That bugs her. She lauded recently Daniel Craig's performance in a movie called Logan Lucky. Now here's an English guy, and she said he just nails Kentucky accent. Just nails it. She said he never dropped a stitch. Absolutely perfect throughout. If you've never seen Logan Lucky, I urge you. It's a really fun crime caper comedy with Craig, Adam Driver, and what's his face, Channing Tatum, and it's a good one. It is a goodie. Hey, twin spin. Creatures here for you, Jason. If I could go back in time and make my ideal Superman movie, I'd cast Rock Hudson circa 1960. I've always felt he perfectly captured the look of Kurt Swan's version of the Man of Steel. If you could go back and cast any actor as any comic book character for your dream movie, who would it be? Well, I found this online after you sent me this. Well, you didn't send me this. You sent me the question, and I looked this up, and somebody, the powers of AI made Rock Hudson a Superman. I gotta agree with you. When I first thought about it, yeah, Rock Hudson could have. He has that look. But looking at this, I realized, well, he would have played a really good Clark Kent too, and that's the key to playing Superman. I mean, Clint Walker would have made an awesome Superman, but he wouldn't have been convincing as Clark Kent. But Hudson could pull it off. It would have been. Especially if he did it in the George Reeves vein of, wise ass Clark Kent. The kind of character that Hudson played in so many Doris Day movies. If he played Clark Kent that way, that could have been fun. That could have been a lot of fun. Now, the first one that came to mind when you talk about an actor, if you could go back in time and have anybody, is the Spirit. And I'm not the first person ever to think about this. I think we've all thought about this if you're a Spirit fan. But James Garner in his prime would have been perfect, because the Spirit was an action guy. He was quick with his fists and everything else, but he was also a kind of romantic foil. He could be a bit of a clown. He could be a bit of a dupe, and he was very self-effacing. He wasn't the lantern-jawed, super uber macho kind of guy. His masculinity was more casual, and I think that Garner would have nailed it. I think that Dave Gibbons in this portrait is even kind of thinking about Garner as the character. So yeah, I'm not going to get any props for being the first guy to think of that. I think that's just accepted. James Garner would have made an awesome Denny Colt. Caden Lane. What are the key elements that distinguish a story that works as a miniseries versus a story that could go on for hundreds of issues? And thanks for lending your experience and expertise to inquiring minds. Well, a miniseries, by definition, has to have a beginning, middle, and end. It has to be like a feature film. It has to be like a novel. A monthly series does not. A monthly series is a series of miniseries. If it's written properly, you're going to have a series of one-shot issues. You're going to have a series of arcs. The arc can be 3, 4, 5, 6 issues long, practically a miniseries. But what distinguishes the monthly from the miniseries is that the monthly has these ongoing subplots and allows for a larger cast. Like I said earlier, if you have the real estate, you can have a larger cast. So a monthly gives you all that real estate. Now, when I did the first Robin miniseries and it sold spectacularly well, and the second one sold even better, they were immediately, hey, let's go to a monthly. And I'm like, whoa. I had a heavy miniseries type premise for the first one. I had a heavy mini-series type premise for the second one, and I had no room for building Tim Drake's world outside of being Robin. So I can't, I don't know where I would start a monthly. I would have to start the world building within the first pages of the monthly book, and I don't want to do that. And I said, these things sold well enough. Let's do a third mini and allow me to introduce his high school classmates, more of his relationship with his dad, blah, 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 and basically set up the monthly, much the way that Amazing Fantasy 15 set up Spider-Man 1. And so they, graciously allowed me to do that instead of firing me and hiring another writer who would be willing to write the monthly. And I was off to the races for 100 issues. And once you do the monthly, you're freed of the confines of the miniseries in that you can start working on the ABC plot structure. In other words, you have an A plot, which is your main plot, the hero versus the villain. Your B plot, which ideally should begin in the middle of your A plot. Like a couple issues in, this little B subplot starts rolling along, becomes the main story, and at the same time, you're introducing a C plot down below it, which will be the main story later on. And, wash, rinse, and repeat. ABC, 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 ABC. So the pot's always boiling. There's always a reason to come back. There's always a dangling thread at the end of your issue to bring the reader back for another 30 days. Best example I can think of is in Spider-Man. He meets Dr. Octopus, he meets the Rhino, he meets this one, he meets that one. But what kept readers coming back month after month after month was he ever going to meet Mary Jane Watson? When he meets Mary Jane Watson, are they going to get along? Now here's Gwen Stacy, here's this, here's that. His Peter Parker's romantic life became the thread that made it a monthly. And they see once again, it's all about real estate. Did you have the real estate in a monthly book, a long-running monthly book, to introduce all of these different disparate elements, this connected tissue, to bring the readers back month after month after month, which is not a burden that the miniseries has. The burden the miniseries has is, tell me a hell of a rousing tale with a sacco ending that makes me glad I bought this thing. And next time you do one, I'll pick that one up too. It's called branding. Garrett Davis, I know you're a reader of 2000 AD. I was curious, who was your favorite 2000 AD writer? Right off the top of my head, gotta give it to John Wagner. Still writing today, as far as I'm aware. Just the go-to Judge Dredd guy, along with Alan Grant, created so many of the terrific characters, and still has the touch. Still does it. Still, he's it. He's the man. The other guy, the incredibly prolific Pat Mills, created so many of the great 2000 AD characters. Nemesis the Warlock, a series I still don't fully understand but enjoy entirely. It's different. I don't know how Mr. Mills's mind works, but boy, he's using a different part of the brain than the rest of us, and I just dig what he does. I mean, he really elevated the tone of the British weekly comics, like all by himself. And others followed, people like John Wagner and others, terrific writers. He also created Slain, which is like a Celtic Conan, but different. He actually did a barbarian character that stood on its own, wasn't just a Conan knockoff, with all kinds of like weird Celtic mythology thrown in. And I know everybody thinks about the Simon Bisley version, but my favorite is the Mick McMahon, when Mick McMahon was on the series. And of course, the totally unsophisticated Flash, which is a guilty pleasure kind of comic. This is nasty, horrible, brutish, and I love it. It's like a 10-year-old's fever dream of a comic book with dinosaurs and death and guns and tough guys and machines and all the rest of it. So just Pat Mills is I'm not once again, not cracking the atom here. Just a tremendous talent, tremendous contribution to comics as a whole, but to UK comics in particular. And I mentioned Alan Grant, but I don't mention as one of my favorite 2000 AD writers, even though I like his 2000 AD stuff, because I think that Alan really, unlike a lot of the other British writers, did his best work here in the American market. He really, did some fantastic stuff, and was a hell of a guy to work with. Just a good dude. But I rank his American work superior to his UK work, which was also excellent. So enough gushing, enough enough geeking out and fanboy love. Pet peeves. I haven't done one of these in a while. I may have even done this one before, but I was up traveling in Pennsylvania, visiting family, and in the local tiny little town where one of my family members lives was a comic shop, little closet-sized comic shop. I didn't go in, and this is not a picture of that comic shop. But what ticked me off about it was its name. And I can't, its name was so bad I can't even remember it. But it was like, the Vermilion Avenger, or, the Lime Green Hornet. It's a name that didn't tell you anything about the store except you didn't want to go in there. Whatever, I can't remember. I remember saying that the name would have been better on a gay bar than a comic shop. The worst crime of all is that the name of the store did not have the word comics in it. So why would you go in? First of all, it's hard enough to get people to go into a comic book shop, even if it does have comic books on it. But you're certainly not going to go in if you don't know it exists, if you don't understand what it is when you see it. It should scream comics. Every comic book shop, they shouldn't be called the Hobbit Hole, or whatever, Heroes Haven, names like that, because it doesn't mean anything. It just means, you want to alert the people that like comics that you're selling comics. So the comic store, Dave's Comics, Comic Book Heaven, something that tells you that it's comic books. I mean, retail comic book sales are hard enough without making it harder, without hiding your light under a bushel, without concealing the identity of your store. Like, your store has a secret identity. It's a gift shop for blue-haired grannies, but it really sells comics. Oh, yeah, that's my pet peeve. I realize other people's entire web channel is pet peeves, but I throw one at you every once in a while. Hey, if you want to contact me, ask a question, suggest a pet peeve. brunobookstore at gmail.com. brunobookstore, one word, at gmail.com is the best way to reach me. I read the emails all the time, catch up with your amazing communiques and your fantastic questions. And on that same note, thank you for all the great questions this week. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. And I'll see you all down the road.